Hello everyone. Sorry it's been a little while since my last video. I was on vacation and streaming as I could, and then decided to take a little break from recording videos for a little while as I got back to my actual job in the real world. But anyway, I have a little bit of an instructional video for you guys today on how I go about painting hair in a generalized cartoony style. You can compound upon these techniques and add more detail to make them more realistic looking. But this is just a basic tutorial on how I sculpt hair when I paint. So hopefully this is useful to you guys, and follow me on my social media if you want to see more of my work. But we're going to move on here. I just started off sketching a basic female head and torso, and I left her bald so that I could add on a separate layer here and create some hair for you. So the first style I'm going to sketch out is a straight hairstyle. With every style I'm doing today, I start off with the general shape of the hair. So I'm just kind of blobbing in the generalized shape of straight hair on her head. If you're curious what brushes I use, I have a video on that, but basically it is the clay roller brush with pressure sensitivity enabled. But I'll leave a link for that in the description of the video detailing the brush settings, and also a link to download it if you don't feel like messing with it in your program. But as you're laying down the shape of the hair, you want to make sure that it is flowing down the shoulders and draping over the shoulders and draping over her scalp, so that it looks like it's laying on top of it and not just falling in front of it, because that will make whatever you're painting look a lot more realistic if it's interacting with what's underneath it. You want to make sure that you add a lighter color. Most of the time the sun will be shining on the top of the head, but it all kind of depends on where the light's coming from. But since in this picture the light source is coming from straight up top, I'm going to have the lighter values on the top of her head. And I also make sure that I add a little line for her part as well and keep that darker. And still building on the shape of the hair, I'm going to make it a little longer. And you see how I drape it over her chest, and I make sure that the hair looks like it's wrapping around her chest and not just falling in front, because then the hair doesn't look like it's really there and interacting with her body. It looks like it's just pasted on top of her, and that'll make it look less realistic or less tangible. Just shaping out the edges of the hair here, figuring out how I wanted to drape it over her shoulder. I reworked that a couple times, and just continuing to shape that hair over her shoulders. I wasn't really sure where I wanted the hair to lay for a little bit there, so I was reworking that quite a bit, like I said. And now I'm going to make sure that I add a shadow on her forehead underneath where her bangs wrap around. That's another way that you're going to make things more tangible. And you'll see there that I added a little bit of skin into her part of her hair as well. And now I'm going in with a darker value and adding in more of the shaded elements of the hair. And I'm going to darken it behind her head because that's where less light is penetrating through the hair and reflecting on the hair. So there's going to be a lot more shadow there. And I'm adding in more lines and details. You'll see that when I draw hair, I don't approach it in the way of drawing individual strands ever. That's just going to give you a headache. You want to draw the hair as a large shape and a large outline of what you want to do, and then just add in details here and there. You'll see that I don't add in every single line of the hair here as it's draping over her shoulder, just a few lines here and there to define it and give the impression of hair. but you don't have to draw every line. In this example that I draw with all of the hairstyles that I'll do in this video, I keep them pretty simplistic in a more cartoonish style, like I said. The less lines that you draw, the less detail that you add, the more cartoonish it's going to appear. And you'll see that I'm adding some highlights on the top of the hair there, a really bright value, just to make it look a little bit shiny. And then I'm blending that in. This is all with the same brush. I'm just increasing and decreasing the size. Adding some highlight on the top of the hair there too, where the part is. And then I add some of that shine down on the lower parts of the hair, but I keep that more of a mid-tone value. It's not as bright because the brightest part has to be where the main light source is coming from, and that's from the top. So this is just reflective light. And the more variations in value that you add to the hair down below, the more interesting it's going to look, but you don't have to. So that is straight hair. That's really simple, and basically I'll be taking these principles that I used in creating the straight hairstyle, and I'll bring that forward with every other style that I do in this video. So here I'm going to do a more curly hairstyle. I kind of do these sweeping C-shape motions and little swirls to get a feel for how the hair is going to be shaped and where it's going to turn. But basically just simplistic little squiggles. I don't go nuts on it. I just make sure that the brush size is big and blocky, and I go in. And you'll see there that I'm starting with a darker value behind her face right off the bat. You can do this if you wish, and then blend it out into a lighter value. That way you have your shadow already built in behind her head. So that's kind of convenient. And I'm just adding in more of that structure of her hair, and I'm deciding how frizzy I want it to be and where I want it to lay. Again, even though this is more curly hair that has kind of more of a life of its own and doesn't just kind of drape down, it is still going to make contact with her shoulders, so you want to make sure that it is doing that in a way that is tangible and feels real. And now I'm adding a lighter value on the top of her head, still deciding how frizzy I want her hair to be. I think I started off with this being pretty frizzy. And now I'm adding her bangs with a little bit of a darker value underneath so that there's some shadow. And then I'm going to paint back over it with the lighter value of the hair again, just to blend it in. And now I am going in with darker value to line in the curls. This is the important part here. You can see I'm just doing little outlines. I'm finding the little bit of curl and I'm sketching it in very finely and very rough. You can see it's just little swooping C curls. And I'm just kind of finding them wherever they might look good. And I'm defining edges around the edges of the blobs that I've already placed down. I'm kind of like cleaning them up with those darker values. And then I'm adding little squiggles on the outsides here and there, just to make them look like little hairs that have scattered. And I repeat this motion basically everywhere, just these little C shapes. Swooping them around on every curl, and they're going to be darker on the bottom of the hair here, and as I go up the hair to the lighter values, I will start sampling lighter colors to create those lines rather than using the dark value, so that it fades up the hair and everything gets lighter. And now I'm adding the lighter values on top. And this is a very simplistic, poofy hairstyle. And I'm just adding in a little bit of a part there with the darker values again. and re-adding a little bit of detail on the top of her hair with the highlights. And some contrasting darker values here and there just to add the curl. I'm just kind of going back and forth. And then I'm adding in that shadow underneath her bangs like I did before. And the final highlights to make those curls pop. Just a little bit of highlight, you don't need to go crazy. And adding it at the top of the hair. And that's a very, very frizzy hairstyle. I can also show you here that if you want to tame down that hair and make it less frizzy at the top, you can erase some of that here and reshape it so that the curl is more focused on the bottom of her hair and then the top is more tame. It all depends on what kind of shape you want to do. And then you can add more frizzes and make it look more like a dainty hairstyle that was like styled that way purposefully. I don't know. Something more tame. So that's curlies. And now I'm going to show you another style that I did. I think this was just a bun. And I'm just sketching in the shape like I did with the other two styles. And just a little bun shape at the base of the neck there. And I'm already thinking of adding in stray hairs here and there just to figure out the swooping, shapy motions of how the hair is going to flow. Normally when I draw, I don't draw someone without hair first like this. I normally draw the hair as I'm creating the character, so it's a little bit more natural. Obviously I just did this for this case so I could show you guys how I could do different styles on the same character. But just to let you know, usually you won't have to think about it like you're draping it on a model like this, but it is kind of useful to think about. So I'm just adding some shading and keeping the highlight on the top like the other hairstyles. And then I'm going in with that darker value like before and adding in some lines here and there, just a little bit for detail. And you can see at the top of her hairline, I kept it kind of squiggly so that it looks like individual hairs. And then I am adding in some shading under that hair because her hair is not pulled back very tight, so there is going to be a shadow. And I'm just cleaning it up there and adding a few more darker lines and details. And now I'm going to craft the bottom here and the edges of her hairline, just adding in more detail. And then I'm going back with her skin tone and cutting into that hair so that it looks like it's more strands of hair. But I start off with a large shape like always. Now I'm just adding in more darker lines and details, going back and forth with the dark and lighter values to craft this shape. See, the bun is very easy because it's more large shapes and small lines than drastic forms like the other hairstyles were, but it's still the same concepts. Almost done with the hair. Now we just have to add in those final highlights. Keeping them more concentrated on the top and adding some really sharp ones for extra shine. And that is hair in a bun. Super simple. And I think the next one we're gonna do is a more drastic updo. This one's gonna be a side shave ponytail. So this one's gonna look really cool in the end. So for this shape, I just add a large blob on the top, and I'm going to keep the sides of her head empty because that's where it's going to be shaved. And you can keep her hair completely gone there, and that'll be a completely bald shave, or you can add on to it like I do in this drawing. And I'm just adding some highlight onto the top where the light is, like I said before, keeping it faded and blended. And I'm adding on that highlight right away because I'm just going to show you that you can do it in any order that you want. You don't have to add the highlight last and the darker values first. You can do either or, whatever's comfortable. I go back and forth. So after I'm done shaping out that top part of the hair, I'm going to have it swoop down the back of her head, and then it's going to tie up into a little squiggly ponytail. I wasn't sure on whether or not I wanted her to have really curly hair on the back or not, but I decided just a little bit of a wave. So I have that go into a ponytail, a short ponytail. And just figuring out the shape of that with the darker value. And then I'm taking that medium tone and I'm kind of blending it in with the skin. And I'm also color picking lighter and darker values to keep it really, really light. I want it to be sort of transparent looking so that it kind of blends in with the skin tone so that you can tell it's shaved. I'm defining the edges of that. And then fading it out with the paler, more skin tone color so that, again, it still looks shaved. The duller that it looks, the more shaved it looks because it's as if the skin is peeking through. So you can keep it like that. Very simple. Or you can add in the darker details like I've been. But I just add in some more lines here like I've been with the other ones. And have it swoop down behind her head. And just drawing out and defining some of those lines here. Just adding some shadow to her ponytail. Blending it together. And you'll see that I like to add like a darker blob that fades out to a little bit of a lighter color at the bottom because it makes it look like light is reflecting from the bottom a little. Adding a little highlight on her ponytail and some more defining details with the darker value. And then just defining that shadow underneath her hairline. And adding in those little skin tone swipes so that it looks like hair. And then this is the part that's also kind of optional. I just add in little dark swipes for the hair, and I make sure that they're all facing the same direction so that it looks like the hair is swooping in all one direction. And then I'll take lighter highlights as it gets higher up so that it looks like the light is shining on the little pieces of hair. You kind of have to draw the individual little hairs if you want to convey that sort of feeling, but you don't have to. You can just leave it one smooth shade, and I add in a little bit of highlight here and there to make certain little strands defined, and then I add in that hard highlight onto the top of her hair here. These are simple little tricks that you can use to convey the idea of hair and get your point across, but it doesn't have to be super detailed unless you want it to. Anyway, I really hope you guys liked this video, and I hope it was super helpful to you. Again, you can check out my social media here if you want to see more of my work. Thanks so much.